So, welcome to part 2 of this exceptionally engaging and interesting exchange with TRA. And in this, we're going to be talking about his stint as an entrepreneur, about the jet-setting ways, maybe like a James Bond. And TRA, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Before you started, corporate, you also did IIM Ahmedabad.
Yeah.
You went to IIT Madras and told them I'm not coming.
Yes.
Did you do that to IIMs also, or how did
Okay, I'll tell you the story there too. So 1978, I passed my engineering, okay, at UVC, as I said, okay. And then I was very clear by that time in the 7th or 8th semester that I'm going to do management. And a lot of my friends were also doing very well.
I'm interrupting intentionally.
Huh?
What made you become so clear that you wanted to do management?
I'll tell you why it was, I was always good, but I was never very deep in engineering in that sense. I like to do a lot of breadth in that sense. And I was reasonably good at that point of time that I was good at big pictures and wide and connecting the dots. Okay. And it so happened, I don't know exactly how. So when I was talking about what we want to do, and I used to talk to my, as I said, to my aunt and uncle who were at ISC. And during that time was speaking to some of his friends. And they said, then I think you should not pursue, usual BE. I would otherwise pursue the ME and PhD. PhD was not for me because anyway I was not going to be there. ME could have done, which is, do a master. But at that time, they said, why don't you do management? And there is this thing called IIM, Ahmedabad, Bangalore, and Calcutta at that time. IIM, ABC, they were called. And you said, apply. We never knew. First of all, I hadn't really known Ahmedabad. I knew it somewhere in Gujarat. Okay. And they said, this is good. Why don't you try? And it will help you to do general management and do what you think it is. So I said, yes, I think that's what I want to do. Second is, a lot of my friends who were good started writing to US universities. There was no internet or anything. So they were going to do their masters. But then you have to fly to the US and then it's going to cost you money. And we didn't have that kind of money at home. So US was out in that sense. Okay. So I didn't get to study in the US and it was not an option for me. So the only other thing was to do ME, but MBA was good. So coming back to, so I said, all right. And that time you had to fill in 3 separate applications for Ahmedabad, Bangalore and Calcutta. At that time, you filled 3.
It was not the common.
It was not the common one. And the Bangalore IIM was at St. Joseph's at the beginning of Double Road. That's where the IIM Bangalore started at that time. So I wrote these exams, went through the process, and I got selected at IIM Ahmedabad. Okay, and the college starts in July. Unfortunately, Bangalore University results didn't come. So it got delayed. I wrote to IIM Ahmedabad and said, my result is delayed. Can I join later? They said, I'll give you 1 week extension. Okay. I said, I got 1 week extension, no result as yet. And if I can't produce my marks card and result, I can't join, right? They gave me another way. I said, pleaded with them again, all this through telegrams at that time, And I was very keen to go. But so this is the 1980 batch, 78. To give 2 weeks extension, no result. So they said, sorry, we can't take you in this year. Okay. Please apply next year. Okay. I was quite disheartened. And so I'll come back to this. And actually it was, I think, very good. So I had to do something and I joined a company called PSI and I'll come to actor. But to complete the IIM story, I said I will write again next year. Okay. And this comes to your point in terms of having clear goals and surety. And this time I applied only to IIM Ahmedabad, only to one institute. I wrote the exam, came to the interview, okay? And the interview was still here at the Institution of Engineers, I remember. And the professors asked me only 3 questions, okay, at that time. And one of those 3 questions, I still remember, what are the flowering trees of Bangalore? Okay? And the other 2 were where are you working, etc. And said, interview over. I said, what? It just lasted 3 questions and about 4 minutes was the interview. That's all. I said, I'm gone this time. Okay, I won't be able to get through, etc. But then I got selected at IIM Ahmedabad. After I joined there, we all got introduced. Then I recognized one prof there. It was a Professor Amarlal Kalro in the production and quantitative methods, PQM. Very gentle, very expert professor. Then I recognized him, but I didn't know his name at that point of time. And so he was in the interview. I said, sir, you were a professor, you were in the interview. He said, yes, I remember you, he said. I said, you were the same professor with whom I was corresponding for extension. Okay. So he said, I recognized you. You're so keen on joining and you're desperate to this one. That's why we asked you the 3 questions. And then you were automatically selected.
Wow.
That's how I got into the 1981 batch of
Wow.
IIM
So
Ahmedabad.
they remembered your earlier interactions. Yes. Absolutely amazing.
So, and well, things are different after that and the went in. And of course, it was a tremendous experience.
So you got campus placed after that?
Yeah, 1981 campus placement at TCS. And TCS came in the morning and Wipro in the afternoon.
Okay.
So at that time, you have to take, if you're selected in one, you have to either take that or reject it and then appear in the next interview. So 8 of us got selected at TCS. 8 of us from the batch joined TCS. Okay, but I quit TCS after 1 year because, anyway, that's a different story. And maybe to complete the story, it is a great company. Okay, and there were only 300 people. And people recognize today, and this is, I'm being very candid, they say Narayan Murthy was the father of information technology, all bullshit. The real person who made Indian IT was F.C. Kohli.
F.C. Kohli.
Okay. F.C. Kohli at TCS, his value systems, TCS Air India building, 9th floor. He lived across the road on the other side. Precisely from his house to his, as a crow flies, is 50 meters. There are apartments on the other side, sea facing, that's very simple. Very simple, honest, hardworking. When I joined, I think TCS, we were about 3,000 people. F.C. Kohli would meet every person twice a year. Okay, you will actually went to his cabin and sat with him. That's a great guy in that sense. And I think he had the vision to build TCS. Unfortunately for me, TCS intake was all graduates, BEs, PGs, IIMs, other universities. And in the first year, you become really a cog in the wheel. I mean, I was doing COBOL programming, okay? And COBOL programming, no great fun at that point of time. Either you have to do Fortran or you have to do COBOL, okay? And I did 8 or 9 months, and I was writing a program which goes into some other program, and I don't even know what it is doing, etc. So I got tired at the end of January, February. And the fact that 78 to 79, when I was waiting for my second attempt at IIMA, I had worked at this company called Processor Systems India, PSI. PSI just finished 50 years as a computer company in India, much before the time Infosys was born. Okay, so I had joined and that's it was started by 2 Stanford graduates, Dr. Ravindran and Vinay Deshpande. They returned from Stanford to set up what do you call the Desi computer companies. What can be done in here? And Dr. Ravindran was a genius. I had the fortunate privilege to work with him as his project. I was the only IIM guy in that group, so I did a lot of things, and that's part of my entrepreneurship. I'll talk about it. But it was really a pleasure. I worked in that company for 11 years, And so I said, I wrote a letter. That time there was no phone. Phone, you had to wait for trunk call, right? So I wrote a letter to Ravi saying, I'm getting bored here. He said, what are you doing there? Come to Bangalore. So I submitted my resignation at TCS. And I was a fool. I submitted my resignation on the 29th of January. Okay. And 30th of January, there was a guy called Jose Abraham. And I'll come back to Jose Abraham later. Jose Abraham was assistant manager HR there. He held up my January salary. And he says, because you resigned and you have to give notice, there is a bond that you will serve. I said, you're not using me very well. So he said, I won't pay you. I said, all right, you don't pay me. Okay. And I quit on January 30th. I did my full job, closed on February 1st of 1982. I landed in Bangalore, back home here, and joined PSI again. So I think the PSI story, that's how I came back to PSI.
When you were
it was a very small company, one of the earliest startups Today we talk of startups. This was really a startup in those days, who wanted to build computers in India. We built the first PDP-11 equivalent at that point, which is called Omni, which is basically with instruction code, etc. We also built a lot of gadgets, which were far ahead of their time. And that's where I started as a project. Because I had an MBA background, I worked, in fact, in my first stint, I had worked in hardware, and that's a very interesting story in hardware. 78 to 79, when I went and met Dr. Ravindran, he said, okay, you're going to be here. And I told him I'm going to write next year, but So what he said is, all right, we have started a project called Automatic Trunk Ticketing, ATT, which is itemized STD bills. And we do this as a retrofit to Strowger and Crossbar exchanges. So he said, I'll send you to Shankarpuram exchange. So I went to Shankarpuram exchange. Behind it is all wires, And you connect a microprocessor to that. And you can tap into the wire. And when the call started and when it ended, which are the dial numbers. And it will give you a printout. It sounds strange today, but we actually generated STD itemized billing, it used to be called. So otherwise, how many STD calls you made? People will say, I didn't make that call and all that. So it was very interesting. The advantage of that was, of course, because we were in the exchange and we had a free run. There's no such thing. I used to come home to have bed, bath, breakfast and then leave, right? So we were in the exchange and we knew how the calls proceed exactly in the exchange. So you could tap in a call, put a phone and call anybody anywhere. Okay, so we could make plenty of free calls all over India in that sense, So I probably misused it a little bit.
So it's very interesting, TRA, that you speak about FC Kohli. A very dear friend of mine was also one of the founding members at a very well-known IT services organization in India. Now, it started in India, but then it's now one of the big three, so to say. And I'm fortunate enough to call him Anna. And so we were talking about IT and a whole lot of things. And he said something very interesting. He said, the person who really made all of this IT possible in India is FC Kohli. And, he came from TCS as well. And you'd say that we wouldn't have a problem if we had to just carry his bags. Whenever he was around, we wouldn't have a problem carrying his bags as well, because there is that visionary thought process that he had, and he saw that we could do. Also reminded of another anecdote that my father used to say. He said that by 2050, between 2030 and 2050, he was a man of many parts. One of the things that he also dabbled in was astrology.
Astrology? Okay.
And he would cast the horoscope of nations and take a look at it. And one of the things I remember him telling me is that between 2020 and 2050, India will be one of the most predominant nations in the world. Much like the Middle East dominated world economy with oil, we will be able to dominate be a very dominant force, economic force. And he had a sense of humor. So he said, that probably nature took care of the oil there. Here also nature took care of developing our brains, and therefore with our brain power, and computers is IT, information technology is what's going to make it all possible.
Yeah.
And I think it's coming true, because most of the places in the US as well, a lot of the technology, we do have people from our let's say, heritage, our culture playing a large role. So I think, you're talking about TCS, and then that you quit TCS.
Yeah.
And you landed up in Bangalore with PSI.
With PSI back again, without 1 month's salary. And that too, people today might wonder, but after graduating from IIM, can you guess what my salary was at that time?
I will not take a guess, because I know.
Yeah.
Therefore, I will not say anything then, because if it wasn't 4 figures, it was a big sum then.
It was a big sum. It was almost. It was 1,200 rupees a month at that time with 10% HRA if you produce the rent receipt.
Correct.
And if you don't have a rent receipt, you don't do this. So because I was staying with my aunt and I couldn't produce a rent receipt, okay? And therefore I got only 1,200. But there were a lot of people who would write out a simple receipt and submit it and claim that 120 rupees. So first lesson, I never did that in a sense. So you need to be clear about and this was my first job and almost first job, right? In that sense. But I think you have to be very clear that whether you want to do or not. But I was very happy. I used to take the bus number 81 from Worli Seaface to Mantralay, what is known as Churchgate, walk to TCS office and in the evening, this is an anecdote. I'll tell you why I love this. In the evening, from Air India building, we used to walk to Homi Modi Street to the Tata House and we would play billiards there. Okay. In Tata House, which is the headquarters of the Tatas, there's a clubhouse, right? So all TCS employees were automatically members. We would play table tennis, this one. And we used to see a lot of the stalwarts walking in and out there. I think the future leaders of the Tata group there in that sense, So I think in a sense, even the short stint that was there was enjoyable in TCS. So let's come back to, but it was not satisfying from a point of view of contribution. And I thought I could do much more. Yeah. So I think recognizing, I'm not saying you switch job. This was the only time I switched a job after 1 year because the rest were all at intervals of 10 years. I spent a decade each in my next 3 companies, right? Okay. So probably 10 years and came back to PSI now I call my corporate stint as entrepreneurship because I think, and you will see why, I like to join companies which are small in that sense, right? So maybe TCS even with 3,000 people was very big. PSI had 20 people probably in that sense, 20, 25 at that point of time, hardware, software. And I said I will do projects there and also sales in that sense. I was also a sales guy. And we built a lot of products at that point of time. Remember, this was the time when IBM had left the country, and we wanted to do indigenous computers and all that kind of stuff. 1977, IBM and Coca-Cola were thrown out of the country, at that point of time. And therefore, there were a lot of companies. To name the companies that were the top 5 at that point of time was DCM, HCL, PSI, ORG, and I think it was ECIL probably. I'm not familiar. I may have missed one. Of which DCM is no more.
DCM also used to be DCM.
DCM I mentioned.
Yeah.
DCM, HCL, ORG in Baroda, PSI, and I forget one more. I may be mistaken. Anyway, you can excuse me. It's 50 years ago. Okay. Of which DCM doesn't exist. ORG also, I think, got merged or lost. PSI still exists as PSI Data. We just celebrated 50 years in December last year. Probably the first company to celebrate the golden jubilee here. So PSI was very small, but Dr. Ravindran especially, the chairman, founder, was exceptional. His thinking was far ahead of its time. And the products that he thought of at that point of time, including computers which could be used for data processing and data analytics with business impact and speed, velocity of business. For example, my major customers were banks, Citibank, Grindlays Bank, and Hong Kong Shanghai Bank. I forget, there were a couple of other big US. All these banks and were our customers because we built products for them which automated a lot of things. For example, Telex for fund transfers was a box which enabled you to do fund transfers very quickly. We built a message switch for them. Message switch would allow you to send a message from one device to another device. It sounds funny, but that was built at that point of time, which already got the velocity of business. Then there were airlines for which we built a lot of software which worked on the principle of you take the airlines, people pay money, but then there is a lot of money which is available as float, in the sense before it is actually consumed. So we built a float management system for airlines, things like that. But several of these products, And the biggest product was the automated trunk ticketing system. Before the C-Dot and others built the electronic exchanges. The C-Dot came much later in that sense. Okay, there was also another area which got exposed and which I think is serving me very well today was our work with PSI with HMT on computerized numerical control, CNC machines. CNC machines and data acquisition systems. So what we know as the IoT today, it started out as data acquisition systems in the 1980s, where you acquire plant data and then using sensors and put it into a mini computer and then thing.
So I'm interrupting you intentionally.
Yeah, tell me.
You said 10 years in each of these following that one TCS.
Yes.
What was your thought process when how did it, today we have this word called entrepreneurship.
Yeah. So I'll tell you.
How was it then for you? How did it come about for you?
Yeah. So why I call it entrepreneurship is we're managing everything other than fundraising. In a way, I was also involved in fundraising. Let me talk about PSI. I told you we implemented these. And this box, and this is a very interesting story. Citibank had its main branch at Fort on Dadabhai Navarajee Road.
DN Road.
Okay, DN Road branch. We had the keys to the DN Road branch for months together because we shipped out the box from PSI, Bangalore. It was not yet ready, but he said, never mind, you come and build it here. So 4 of us, I was the kind of the project manager, sales guy, if you will, and the 3 or 4 developers were there. We would work in the branch late at night. All the branch guys will go away, and then the keys will be with us. We'll lock the midnight or so. When we close. We physically lock the branch keys, okay? And then go and stay. Why I call it entrepreneurship. Where we used to stay in? This was at the YWCA near, not Regal, the Colaba, near the Colaba entrance.
Yes.
There's a road which connects Colaba to the Sea Face, Marine Drive. And that corner there used to be. It used to cost 40 rupees a day per bed in a shared 4 people in a row. So we had 4 engineers, 160 rupees. 10 rupees was the allowance for breakfast, lunch and dinners. Okay, 50 rupees. All right. So the cost was 200 rupees, 50 into 4 people, 200 rupees per day into 36,000 rupees. Okay. Now we stayed on for months together in that place. PSI, the habitual story was, you don't know when your salary will come. Okay. Salary will be paid sometime during the month and you don't even know which month's salary you're getting. You will get paid sometime as and when the money comes in. So in a sense, we didn't know when the money would come in. But all of us were really smart. Really hardworking, and we believed in the cause. Nobody took money. So in a sense, we were so committed to the work at that point of time that we never thought of quitting in that sense, right? And we continued to work. And I used to stay in my aunt's house and I didn't have too much of the salary. By the time 3-4 months had built in and we had to pay the YWC and so on, there was a period at which we had built up a whole lot. So I remember now also, for about 3 months or so, I paid out from my account 18,000 rupees or so for the backlog of payment till, forget about getting salary, you had to get allowance for the hotels. So in a sense, my commitment to work and the ability and the fact that we were so attached to the company, not even being promoted.
I have a question here for you. This trait that you were an employee,
yes,
and yet you took on the responsibility of paying for the company even when you are not being paid salary.
Yes.
My question is in 2 parts.
Yeah.
First part, did everybody in PSI do that? 1. Second, what about, the first part is, does everybody in PSI do that means, was Anand the only person who did it? If not, what about the structure, the leadership in PSI that made you want to even go out of your way, pay from your salary and still do the work?
Yeah.
What was it?
Okay.
Was it the individual or was it the organization?
I would say it was more individual because of the way I just loved working with Dr. Rabindran. Okay. And he would come out with so many ideas. He was far ahead of his time in terms of what could be done from But Why the company was not successful? They were very poor business folks. As you can see, money was not collected in time. We had devotee as a customer who will not pay you for a long time. Our government, even then it was very poor. And so on and so forth. So you ask me, I think very few people did it in that sense. Fortunately for me, nobody else depended on my salary, right? In that sense, at home. My father was working, my sister had started working at that point of time. So they didn't really need my salary. My salary would have gone into the bank straight away. And I started at PSI at 800 rupees. And when I moved from TCS, I think they offered me 1,800 or 2,000 rupees, which was still per month, which was still a fairly good salary at that point of time. Okay. So I think I did that primarily not so much as an organization, but as much as a commitment to, because I loved working with.
What was that about Dr. Ravindran that sticks out for you?
Yes.
Without thinking too much.
Yeah, I'll tell you.
What was it that made you want to do this?
See, one is, he was obviously a technically very sound person, far ahead of his time in terms of how technology could enable businesses in that sense. Third, he had a daredevil attitude in that sense. Let's go build this stuff, We'll worry about prices. We'll say, how do we price it, etc. You say, you do your MBA, you go ahead and do this kind of stuff, He would empower you. He would allow you to take risks. So the other thing about entrepreneurship is taking risks. So I think as a company, we took lots of risks in both whether the technology would work or not. And fourth is being customer centric. Mm-hmm. So he would never say no to any customer request. Mm-hmm. So you have change requests. Our change requests would come every day. That's it. So people want this feature, that feature. When they see something, they want something more in that sense. So he would say, all right, go ahead and do that. So I think risk-taking ability to actually think through and make things happen, work with you with rolled up sleeves, treat you like family. We used to do lots of meetings at his house. I remember quite a few days when we worked till 3, 4 a.m. and then I used to go to a room and sleep in his house. So things like that.
So I think, the reason I asked you this question is this. There are so many entrepreneur startups today.
Yes.
Youngsters.
Yeah.
Built on the platform that people like you have made possible.
Yeah.
FC Kohli and the doyens of the IT industry and all industry in India. I think the human aspects of what you mentioned right now, I don't think they've changed with time at all.
Yeah.
That today also, if I were to inspire somebody, first and foremost, I need to treat them as human beings, not as human resources.
Yes.
So human beings, so it is a person to person. So relationship is important.
Correct.
The second thing that you said, and that is beautiful, is empower and allow them to take risks.
Yes.
Like, what I mentioned about my father. What's the worst that will happen? It won't work. At least you'll find that it doesn't work.
Correct.
But that ability to empower people to take that risk.
Yeah, that's right.
And go and otherwise, innovation will not happen. Invention will not happen.
Yes, that's true.
And the third is always treat them the way they would like to be treated and the way I would like to be treated.
Correct.
If I were an entrepreneur.
Yes.
I think if that is done, then there is really no difference between an entrepreneur and an entrepreneur. It's just the title and the financial state that is changing.
So, the kind of windfalls that you're expressing today in the financial system didn't exist at that time, Very few companies were listed at that point of time. All the corporates, in the sense that the stock market was there. But if people remember, every city had a stock exchange. There's the Bangalore Stock Exchange, Chennai, Madras Stock Exchange, Bombay Stock Exchange, Ahmedabad Stock Exchange. And people used to, do trading using fingers, right? On the floor, in that sense. So, this maturity and the windfall profits of an IPO or a listing came much later, So, even if you're a promoter, it's okay. You put in money, you borrow money from the bank. There are only 2-3 sources. You had your own money or you took a loan from the bank. And if the bank was gracious enough, they'll give you loan. And then you had a LC, open a letter of credit, and then overdrafts. So, this was the story. So I would understand that because I was an MBA anyway at that time, right?
So I'm intentionally going to take you off your prepared.
Yeah, no problem.
Because I want TRA, the individual, to come out for business.
Go ahead, no problem.
The thing is that you said something about financial windfall.
Yeah.
This is a topic that I keep talking to people about.
Yeah.
We are going slightly off the script, so to say.
No problem. We'll do that.
I heard it for the first time in Manoj Bhargava's Tycon address of 2013, where he was actually in Silicon Valley. He was giving a Tycon address.
Yeah.
And he was talking about the valuations of companies.
Yeah.
And he said, back home where I come from, it's called gambling or a lottery. But here you guys are seeming to think that this is par for the course. So that's the background. My question to you is, we are seeing a lot of valuation-based games.
Yes.
Recently, one of these EdTech portals has been in the news for a while for all the wrong reasons.
Correct.
My question to you is this based on any fact, or is it just a lottery kind of potential windfall, something will drop from the sky kind of thinking that makes these valuations possible?
See, in a sense, it's based on a number of factors. It's also based upon demand and supply, in a sense, of financial goods today. Third, it's also based upon the fact that a lot of the today's world has a get-rich-fast philosophy, in a sense. So how do you do that? Which brings you to multipliers. In a sense, it's based upon future, a glorious future, as opposed to past data, which is based upon past achievements, and therefore this is what it will be. In the past, and this is possible, all of this is all possible, and I want to talk about it a little later, because of disruption that's happening. I think the key word here is a lot of disruption happening, because the first industrial revolution, and I'm going the first industrial revolution lasted about 2 centuries. The second industrial revolution lasted about a couple of decades. The third industrial revolution with computers and robots, etc., lasted 2 decades. The fourth one with internet and what's happening today is probably 1 decade, but now you're going to see about 3 disruptions every decade. That's going to happen. So we'll come to that in a little while. Because of the velocity of change, because of these disruptions, and also the maturity of the marketplace. And second is wealth creation. There's a lot of wealth that has been created in India today in the middle layers, which was not visible earlier. Second is, this wealth traditionally used to be deployed in physical goods. Earlier, land, most common that is there, or housing, etc., gold, all these. But the newer environment which has been created with consumerism, etc., has opened many more avenues, both in products and services. Because of the nature of products and services that are there, and the ability of a large population running into millions, which can consume these, the ability to communicate this through the digital media that is happening and digitalization, the financial inclusion and empowerment that has happened due to Aadhaar and plus, everything that has happened, the ability to make this available in all languages, vernacular, 16 of them in India, whatever, apart from English, instantaneously launch, not later. All this has led to the fact that people have more avenues, more risk-taking ability, more retail investors, and therefore there is a lot of money chasing few good opportunities. In that sense, I think.
My follow-up on this is 2 parts. One of the things that you said is get rich quick.
Yes.
I'm going to keep that as one part. The second part is, I came across a meme that a certain currency in the world is not backed by anything, but
a certain
currency in the world is not backed by anything except their military.
Yeah.
Right? So the 2 parts, the get rich quickly, seems to be a certain mindset or a mentality. And when I work with youngster startups, the one question that I ask them is, okay, why are you doing what you're doing? And if I get the answer, I want to make money, I say find somebody else to work with. Because money is never the end. It's only a means to an end.
Yes. Okay.
And in bringing it back into the happiness helix, it is actually on the downward slide, because that is when I'm going to be extremely selfish and focused only on me.
Naturally. That's true.
Because there is only so much I can eat. Like in Tamil, there is this saying, there is, the stomach is only this big.
Yes,
right?
correct.
How much can I fill in? I cannot fill in for next year. I can only fill
And
in.
if you fill more, there's indigestion.
Correct.
Right.
And that's, today we are having a problem of obesity because of plenty rather than starvation and poverty.
Yes, that's true.
It's a touchy topic. I'm not going there. So I'll come back to the question. Get rich quick.
Get rich quick, yeah.
And is there any backing for the actual riches is my question.
Backing for the actual riches. Okay, so what is rich? What is richness?
I'd love to hear from
right?
you.
So the question is, that is the question of what actually the fundamental question is wants and needs. Okay, in that sense. So what is your wants and needs? And it also goes back to your happiness, Alex. If you have fulfilled and you have satisfaction or you have delight, which is one level higher than satisfaction, and that is satisfaction of what? Of your wants and needs in that sense, then I think that is a measure of whether you have achieved your richness or not. The question is, it might be even material. For example, if you wanted a car and you got a Maruti Swift and you're very happy with it, that's fine. But if your intention is that I got a Maruti Swift, but now I need a Honda, and after the Honda, I need a Range Rover. After the Range Rover, I need a Rolls Royce. And after the Rolls Royce, I need a Lamborghini or whatever next. There's no end to that, right? In that sense. The question is, therefore, it is going to read. The question is, one is, when do you feel fulfilled with this? So this is only one example of richness. There is also the fact that I want to be rich, but I do want to display it. That means I want others to know that I am rich. Okay. So this is the second problem, if you may say so, or the second goal, which is materialistic in the world. I'm not saying don't be materialistic. You certainly need comfort. You certainly need to have a minimum set of wants and needs to feel to enjoy life and longevity. You need. I'm not saying be a sannyasi in that sense, right? But you need certain things. But you need to be able to say, this is what I want to achieve. And if I achieve this, I will feel happiness. And most important, I tell people, if you get the 2 billion that I lost in the stock market today, being one of the top 5 companies or whatever it is, or the 2 billion that I gained, I could have gained 5 billion. But if I lost 2 billion, I didn't get. What will it do? It won't get you sleep. So I think you have to feel satisfied and you have to get 8 hours sleep. That is probably the most two main conditions of happiness that you can have, right?
I came across this wonderful statement where it said, the word, I don't agree with this word, detachment. I actually prefer the word non-attachment rather than detachment.
Right. That's right.
So I will use the word non-attachment so that gets more popularized rather than the detachment that is used. Non-attachment does not mean that you do not own anything. Non-attachment means that nothing owns you.
Yes, I think so.
Right. I think that's a beautiful way of saying it. That's the decocted distilled essence that I got from what you said. It is not wrong to want to have a few things, want to achieve a few things, but it should be for the right reasons, not to show that I've arrived in life or that I've achieved something in life. Because if I have to show that I've achieved something in life, it means that I'm inherently inside and insecure. So the more I feel insecure inside, the more I will show off outside. So let me come back to the question.
How come?
The valuations. Is there any backing for the valuation is my question, or is it a lottery ticket?
Well, there are various theories in terms of valuation, and I'm not a financial expert and I never worked in the financial industry.
That reminds me, a good friend's brother is Ashwath Damodaran.
Yes, I know.
And so he's supposed to be, hopefully one of these days I should get him.
Ashwath Damodaran's class is excellent actually for valuation, and he makes the right statements in terms of what valuation is. And most often, in fact, I must say here, just as aside, we had a Managerial Accounting 1 and Managerial Accounting 2 class in IIM. Okay? And I'll come to some of these fundamentals, and I'll probably come back to your question. But since you triggered this, and we had a professor, Srinivasan, I think it was Srinivasan.
Must have been a good man.
Oh, no.
The name itself says
he
it.
had taught at Harvard Business School, and he came.
Srinivasan.
At Manac 1, he taught us all the, sources of funds, uses of funds, and balance sheet, and etc. And he tore up the ITC balance sheet in the classroom, after having fully dissected it. So he's saying valuation. I'm just reminded of him. He was like three decades before Ashwath Damodaran, and people will remember him. Fantastic guy, And I'll come to another anecdote subsequently there, but we'll go back to your question. So valuations are based on future earnings potential that you have, and future earnings potential is a multiplier in that sense. Okay,
is that based
and you
on
do a discounted cash flow and all that kind of stuff. This is what we have learned typically. Now, all those will offer already a lower valuation, but a lot of the valuation today is very forward-looking, and it is based on a lot of hype. If you ask me the question, I think
that's what I want.
It is hype in every sense of the word, and in a sense, I think whatever goes up has to eventually come down. And in that sense, that's the reality of the fact. In that sense, that we have seen it in several companies that are there. Second, what will happen if this happens? In an orderly growth of the marketplace with reasonable valuation, more people will make reasonable profits, but the benefits or the profits of economic growth will get distributed equally. Now what will happen is a lot of the speculators and those who took up the valuation and got off the bus will make the profit. So there will be more profits made by a few people, and a lot of the others, especially retail investors, is my belief, who are chasing today, and I'll give you an example, are going to lose, because if somebody has to gain, someone has to lose, right? Today, 40% plus of the retail investors are from the Hindi belt today, in that sense. They were not traditional investors, but money which used to be invested in real property, etc., is being put in the stock market, and that's how a lot of the fintechs, etc. And the way it is projected also, if you see all the ads that came through IPL, etc., it says, look, it's so as easy as pushing a few buttons and you have made your profit for the day. It's not going to be so easy in that sense, right? And for anybody to make a real profit, you have to stay invested for 10 plus years in that sense. Invest and forget is what I would say. And invest in a few companies which have real assets and are creating real value, in the sense whether it is in the product space or services space. I may be old school, but you will not make windfall profits, but you will not lose either, in that sense, to answer your question.
So I think I got the answer, that it is more based on what people think or wish that they will grow to,
yes,
that the valuations are based on. And in many senses, in many spaces, we are finding that they are bubbles that will one day burst. You were saying something about, interestingly, this morning I had an exchange about whatever goes up has to come down. So I recently have acquired a new fitness regimen, which is stair climbing.
Okay.
So this morning I did about 70 floors in about 45 minutes.
Okay.
And I shared it with a few people. One of them is a very good friend. He said, you are really taking many steps up. And so I said, whatever goes up has to come down.
Yes.
And his response was, yes, you are walking up the stairs and your weight is coming down. A very interesting play on words. But I think, whatever goes up has to come down. But that doesn't seem to be the thought process that seems prevalent. One, in the stock market. Two, especially in the VC-funded tech startups or any startup, where they think that it will keep on going up and up and up and up. To me, that doesn't seem to compute, because the real value of money, if you take inflation, the real value, discounted value of money, is there really any growth? Even in the most rosy of of pictures for the future? Or is it just a gamble?
No, I think you will have real growth. I mean, if you ask people, and there is real growth in companies which have really grown. And fortunately for India, especially the half a dozen IT startups, TCS, Infosys, Wipro, etc., have done really well. In fact, I jokingly tell people, I'm an IPO investor in Infosys.
Wow.
Okay? And Infosys paid for my house. Half of my holding paid for my house, which I built in 1994. Okay? The other half I kept, and that enabled me to quit my job subsequently, in that sense. No, jokes apart, I think those have done. Similarly, if you invest very well, and that's one of the things that I did well, I think I started my investment in companies, real companies, in 1995 or so, 94, 95, 30 years ago. And most often, I would say, 95% of whatever I invested, I have kept there. I have not sold. Okay? So, in a sense, that these are very few companies, which do well. And my formula, ask you, is very simple. 2 infrastructure companies, Tata Steel and L&T. 2 finance companies, ICICI Bank and State Bank of India. 2 FMCG companies, Hindustan Lever and ITC. Okay. 2 IT companies, Infosys and TCS. That's it. That is, was enough to be able to make me comfortable in life, in that sense. So this is not gambling. It's in the sense you've invested in companies which are doing well.
Absolutely.
You've de-risked the sectors. That's what I would recommend to people. Don't invest in only one sector. Pick as many. Pick the leaders in the sector, which are typically in the Sensex 30 or Nifty, because they are sure to be there and they're well managed. That's what you would really look for.
Governance.
You're looking for good governance, transparency and management in that sense. And that's where.
I'm going to bring you back to...
So to answer that specific question, yes, there is wealth creation happening. We can't deny that. And in India, it has been built. I think the private sector has also built wealth and the government has invested in infrastructure. But if you went and invested in stocks hoping that you will invest today and 1 year later or 2 years later you will get a windfall or you will become an active trader, what is happening is people are doing trading today. So you cannot be a trader unless that is your profession.
Correct.
If it's your profession, that's fine. But keep profession and personal investment separate.
Absolutely. I agree with you.
So
coming back to the theme, which is entrepreneurship.
We haven't really covered everything there.
No, I have an interesting question for you.
Wow.
I think it's interesting. Let's see. There are pros and cons of being an entrepreneur. There are pros and cons of being an entrepreneur. There are pros and cons of being just an employee. Right? In your mind, I don't want the employee bit. I want you to give me your thoughts. And I want the viewers and listeners to also hear. I personally don't think that there is anything right or wrong, that there is nothing. Entrepreneur, one is better than the other, nothing at all. Absolutely. Personally, I do not have any view on that.
Yeah.
You have been an entrepreneur and done very well. And you coach entrepreneurs, you mentor entrepreneurs, and thousands of them. My question to you is, what are the pros and cons of being an entrepreneur? What are the pros and cons of being an entrepreneur? So that, in both groups, people will, and what are the traits? More importantly, what trait makes for a good entrepreneur? What traits make for a good entrepreneur?
Yeah, good. I think, I'll try to answer it. So quite a difficult question, but...
so it's an interesting question.
It's an interesting question, I think, and it's also very situation dependent. That's the first thing that I would say. If you're asking today, the answer is different. If you ask the days when I was in my younger days, which is in the 1980s, 1990s, and even 2000, if you were, entrepreneurship was not very well known also. People knew businessmen. Businessmen meaning a certain community, a certain mindset are businessmen. Tambram cannot be a businessman in that sense. So in a sense, that's what the thinking was. You're good for learning. You go and become a teacher, or you become a professor, or you become an employee with a 9 to 5 kind of scenario, and be happy with your Tair Sadham. That's the equivalent. This used to be the culture earlier. If you were a little more educated, then I think, and you have more aspirations, then you want to do something little bit more, but in a structured environment. And typically, if you especially came from, who were the guys who became entrepreneurs? For example, if you take my engineering class, only if the father was a businessman and had enough money and who could fund you to start a company, and I won't name the company, but he's a real dear friend of mine even today. He started a computer company here, representing an overseas company, etc. He finished his MS in the US, came back here and started a company and could manage because his real funding was there. Could I have done that? No, I don't think so, because I didn't have the fund, and we didn't have the background also to be able to do that. But at the same time, we were taught how to grow businesses, how to look at profits, how to reinvest profits, and how to be able to build teams. So these are all the traits that you need. So if you want to take an idea, and I've already explained to you how an idea gets converted to a product, some of them which were ahead of their time. So that's all innovation. So I was very much grounded on innovation, very much to take an idea to a product or a launch, which I follow even today. I'll just digress a little bit. Even after 50 years or 45 years of doing this, myself and Madan, I actually brought in, we were wanting to do something. I brought in the Atria University, so chancellor, because they are on sustainability and entrepreneurship is key. So I had a word with Madan and said, this is a university which is focused on entrepreneurship, and we want to do, why don't we look at how TIE can be associated? And this is public news. So over that discussion, this was not it was not unplanned. I actually brought them together at our Matrix conference. To cut a long story short, in about 2 months' time, we launched the Atria School of Entrepreneurship, supported by TIE, which is an idea to a product launch, and the first courses are going to start from January. So this is the philosophy of launching, where there was, so if I go back, an ability to convert an idea, bring the right stakeholders in, be able to convince them that your idea is good, put in money in terms of investment, and show them the roadmap, hire the first people. We, in fact, lined this up, and the program manager is already in place. Hire the right people and talent which is required, which is being able to get. So you get and I will use this later. One of the successes in why I built a 3,000 crore business was horses for courses. So I'll come to that in a little while, but hire the right people, and to be able to grow. You do all this, these traits are still required. But what separated in those days, if you wanted to become an entrepreneur, you had very limited avenues to raise funds. There's no structured stuff like VCs. Even VCs and etc. came through only after the internet boom, in that sense, right? And bust also at that time. Though TIE started in 1995, and TIE started because there was not enough funding for bright Indian Americans of Indian origin who are working in the Intels and the Digital Equipment Corporation. Nobody has heard of DEC now, it's gone. But DEC, Rank Xerox, all those companies, they wanted to start on their own. So that's how TIE started, and VC funding, and then Silicon Valley became big, right? With all the other entrepreneurs, not just the TIE. There's the TIE, there's a German accelerator. So all the accelerators together with universities. But we didn't have such a system here. Even today we don't have. The university setup is not there. The VCs are there and the technologies are there, but the university linkage is just happening in that sense. So we'll come to that, and that's part of what I'm doing today. So these are available. So the traits which I outlined, just to recap, the ability to take a product idea and flesh it out into a idea to a product, what we call a MVP and all that area, or a product or a service. I use product and service interchangeably in that sense, which has the ability to create value and scale, which is important so that it can scale also. Bring the right team in place, put a good governance structure and a marketing plan. All this, if you can do, And entrepreneurship is, if you can do this within a company, then that's good for you in that sense, because you are not taking any risk. You're still getting a salary in that sense. And if the salary has a portion of variable pay, and the concept of variable pay also came later, the variable pay is equivalent to making bonus plus in that sense. And the larger the risk you took, the larger the variable pay that you had in that sense. And that variable pay, in a way, and the IT company started it, became through ESOPs, employee stock options. In a way, that was a way of rewarding you with equity. So it is sweat equity. We call it sweat equity today. So in a way, entrepreneurs actually built a lot of companies, and several of them from within, then went out and started their own companies. If you look at all the major leaders, I think the first 30, 40 leaders all came from TCS earlier. If you look at most of the leaders of today that were there. And several of the people who actually been. So from just to jump, I did my work, and then as an entrepreneur, I had to leave. And you asked me why one would stay. I left PSI because Dr. Ravindran died after a open heart surgery. He went to the best place in the world, which was the Denton Cooley Center in Houston, for a open heart surgery, and 10 days later he passed away. That he couldn't have done anything else in that sense. So after that, the company got taken over by Bull of France, where I still stayed on for 3-4 years. But finally, that being a government company, a coal miner became the CEO. So we wouldn't understand what is happening here. And then, fortunately for me at that time, IBM decided to come back to India. And it was known as Tata Information Systems Limited, TISL. So I was in the first 25 employees of TISL in the systems engineering group. And there, I must have interviewed and selected over 500 people in that first phase of building the systems engineering group in TISL at that point of time. So that was my second stint in entrepreneurship in terms of working for a big brand, building what is called, I did a number of things, systems engineering, two main things. One was, I was called General Manager e-business. E-business was what is today all e-commerce, everything came. And that e-business, it included Lotus Notes workflow, imaging and workflow was the other one, and similar things like that, which are all components of what is today. But I'm talking about 1990.
Yeah.
So building, again, I enjoyed doing that. I think I enjoy building teams, and I have a fairly good ability to pick people in that sense. So I think those are key actually for you.
So if I can
go
slightly
ahead.
tweak what you said.
Yes.
So that I understand it better, and maybe some people listening, viewing will also understand it. Entrepreneurs are actually entrepreneurs.
Yes.
They are actually
mindset-wise.
Mindset-wise, they are entrepreneurs.
And actions-wise.
Most important are action.
Yes.
An ounce of action is worth a ton of words.
And absolutely, in a sense, you're building for a larger good in that sense. I think the collective...
And each and every person's individual status, their familial, their societal, cultural, whatever situation, and their appetite for risk, or if I can use a stronger word, their compulsions, the must-haves, that they cannot afford to take certain risks. There is too much at stake. I think that is probably the difference between an entrepreneur and an entrepreneur. That's the only difference. So you said something about...
but then things have changed a little bit now in that sense, because today's... if you fast forward to today, and the situation has also changed because compared to when I was, or when we studied, or you studied, etc., the number of graduates that are coming out, and I'll just shift to what is happening and why I moved from software to education. So I'll come to that, but if you fast forward here, there are 1.5 million engineering graduates, 15 million all other graduates. As per a lot of the statistics, graduates are degrees today, which is paper-based knowledge, not necessarily even skills. And I distinguish between skills and competencies. Skills are specific usage of a tool, but what you apply, so for example, you know how to use a hammer, but which nail to hit and when to hit with what force will make it a competency, between an ordinary carpenter and a craftsman in that sense. So competencies are what are required today, but unfortunately that is not being taught. So that is situation. But because there are so many, you cannot really expect. And second is because of the demographic profile of India today, you need to have a lot more people. The government cannot create jobs. Private sector cannot create jobs, especially manufacturing sector is with high automation and robotics and humanoid robotics and everything that's come. It's not going to employ a lot of people. Therefore, the employment has to primarily be driven by the services sector, which I think there is a lot of potential, especially in healthcare and hospitality and all these areas. But because of this and another trend which I will talk about, the DDD, just park it for a minute now, and we will talk about it a little later, creating your own employment is probably the best. That means be a job provider, not a job seeker. It's probably going to be important today. In the sense, you become an employer. And how do you do that? You become an entrepreneur. Fortunately, the support for students at this stage, at least in the progressive institutes, entrepreneurship has picked up a lot today. And you can actually graduate with a company, as I say, in that sense. Very few and far between. But more important for us is to come to mass entrepreneurship, which is taking away entrepreneurship back to the, not villages, towns, tier 2, tier 3. Otherwise, the migration will happen. And I think one of the worst things that the present government did was to create 100 more smart cities, which essentially encourage people from tier 2, tier 3 to gravitate to cities. So the urban population increase was caused by the first wave of creating more urban centers, which is probably the wrong thing to do because urban cities already have their own challenges of housing and a variety of other costs that are there and underemployment. So I think entrepreneurship is available, but we probably need to move to mass entrepreneurship and a circular local economy, which is within the area. But that's another story. We will come to that. So back to your question.
Mass entrepreneurship, very interesting last thing that you said. What does that signify for you and how does that pan out?
What it means is to be able to create in each, take for example, Karnataka state. 70% of all, or 60% of the GDP happens in Bangalore, which is totally lopsided in that sense, right? Everybody comes here and thinks that there is an opportunity here, but it is not so in that sense. What about the rest of the place where the resources are available? If we created enough education, enough competencies, that is education plus skills plus the applicability locally, and being able to use local resources in order to improve the quality of life of those people by providing local employment to carpenters. See, the other problem that has happened is everybody is graduating to white-collar jobs. The so-called blue-collar, in the US or in Germany or anywhere, a carpenter or a plumber will come in his Mercedes, fix your sink and collect $250 to $500, right? We don't have that kind of purchasing power or the valuation also. Neither are our plumbers that precision. They're all andaj. You tell him, where is your measuring tape? He says, I have no measuring tape. He'll just take the tube to see the wall and cut, So if you have that kind of plumbers, you'll continue to pay only that, you'll earn that kind of money. But the fact that if I had a plumber today who would do very good work and I have to pay him 1,500 rupees to fix a sink for life, I would pay him. But we don't have that kind. But we can create that, in the sense. There were ITIs which were started some 40, 50 years ago. All the ITIs went defunct, in a sense. And now they're trying to revive them. But it doesn't have the teachers. Where are the teachers to teach those? So the first thing that you need is to be able to train the teachers, which is another story. We'll come to that.
I think it's a good place where I think I'm going to take a break at this point.
Yeah.
And that is going to lead into segment 3, where we will talk about your interest in education, Swada, and the reason for Swada.
Yeah.
But before that, let me recap what we've spoken here. I think the most important messages that I got from speaking with you at this point in time was, one, it's not enough. One, you need to have an idea. To take that idea to completion, there are multiple steps involved in it. First step is to be able to find the right people who can make that idea become a reality. So get the right people, hire the right people. Interestingly, even right in the beginning, you said something. I can look at it from a 50,000 feet view. I can also go down to the roll up the sleeves. You also mentioned Dr. Ravindran and said he will roll up his sleeves and start working. So I think the second part of that is to be able to do a Superman, which is orbit the earth, look down, see something, go right in and handle all of that and go back up. So constantly be able to blend the big picture with the absolute attention to detail that is required, which, like you rightly said, if I know that there is something wrong in the document, I will absolutely find out. So have an idea, be able to ideate, find the right people to work along with you. Third, execution. It's the most important thing. And finally, you didn't say this in so many words, but this is what I've understood. Constantly be a learner in all of that. Constantly learn.
I have a full section on student for life.
Absolutely.
I'll come to student for life subsequently, which is, I think, fundamental to enjoy every day of your life.
Which is what we will do
subsequently.
Which we'll do in the next segment,
Yeah.
where you look forward to TRA's interest in education, excellence, making sure that people don't need to all come to the cities, that they can stay there, they have the right values, they have the right education, and to make sure that they don't forget their roots, which will also be something that we will talk about in part 4. So wait there for the next episode, where I think a lot more of what really matters to TRA will come out, and I'm sure you'll like it. Thank you.